Hello, everyone. You were invited here today because back in 2015-16, we started a compensation study to which there were various levels. This was around the third or fourth level in which we were seeking to do an update on all our E and P scale employee job descriptions because it had not been done since 2000. So that's been 17 years. So as I've said to some of the principals, I think teaching and learning has changed within the last 17 years, so it might be nice to have an updated job description to reflect that. But the same with the work that you do on a daily basis. So we have a different consultant working with us this year, Siegel Waters, who has a lot of experience from the educational side. So things are going to look a little different than they were last year. And we're really excited because you will not have to go to an outside website. They have a nice clean Word document. It's a little bit more education friendly, even for the operational side of it. So I'm happy to introduce Siegel Waters, who will then go through the presentation with you on the questionnaire, kind of give you some background information, try to answer some questions, and then I think we will send out the job questionnaire tomorrow morning for you to complete. I would say for the principal groups, the larger groups, the principal groups, and the assistant principal groups, what we're asking is that you complete it as one. So it will not be like in previous years where each one of you have to complete it. So I do believe the chairs of your group are going to reach out to you after seeing this and decide how to submit it. So that, I know we're doing that for the principals, assistant principals will try to do that for the directors of counseling as well. So with us today are Luis Gonzalez and Elliot Cecil. And so I'm going to turn the microphone over to them unless I have left anything out. Siegel, Waters, or Ms. Kennedy? Nope, we're good to go. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Murphy said, we are about to embark on a classification study for the folks covered by the E&P salary scales. And what I want to talk about in the next 40, 45 minutes or so is what the study is about, what it's going to entail, the role that each of you will play in the study, and then take you through the job description questionnaire, which is the document that Dr. Murphy mentioned that will be completed as part of this process. So why are we doing this study? Again, as Dr. Murphy said, the E&P scale jobs have not been looked at in quite some time. We want to make sure that those jobs are appropriately classified. What does that mean, appropriately classified? It's an HR term. It means that the work that you're doing and the job titles associated with the work that you're doing are properly aligned, that we want to be able to ensure that we can explain what the nature of the work is performed by each of the jobs, each of the job titles, and how one job differs from the other. And that those differences are described in terms of duties and responsibilities, whether you have supervisory responsibilities, and if so, the nature of the folks that you supervise, and a variety of other factors, including independent judgment used as part of your jobs, and the minimum qualifications required for your position, such as required education, required experience, and so forth. So we're going to go about that through this process. We want to ensure at the end of the day that the job descriptions are updated and reflect the work that's performed by each one of you. And we want to ensure that we understand accurately whether a job is eligible for overtime or not eligible for overtime, even though right now they may be on the E&P scales, and that's governed by something called the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the bottom line here is we want to ensure that the classification structure, the series of job titles covered by the E&P scales accurately reflect what you're doing on your jobs. Now, if we were to fast forward to the end of this, what's the expected outcomes? Again, accurate job descriptions and recommendations regarding changes to job title assignment. So it may very well be that the job title that you currently have really isn't aligned with the work that you're doing. And so the outcome of this study, by you telling us, you're the best people to tell us what you're doing, is the basis for us determining, first of all, are the job titles right? Are they descriptive of the work that you're doing? And then, are you in the right job title? And if you are in the right job title, that's fine. But if you're not in the right job title and we determine you should be in a different job title, that may have an impact on the grade attributable to your job. Now, as we do these studies, there are no doubt questions that you have, and hopefully you'll have some questions that I haven't answered. I've been with Siegel now for 25 years, and prior to me being at Siegel, I worked in government my entire career. So much earlier in my career, before I had this gray hair, I sat in a room like this, having to go through a similar study like this, and this was back in the days when I worked in New York City in government there. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that when you're being asked, what's your job about, what are you doing on your job, the natural reactions are, how's this going to affect me? And we want to make some categorical statements more about how it's not going to affect you than how it is going to affect you, to try and take care of some of that nervousness. So first of all, one of the things we can say is that there will be no decrease in salaries as a result of this study. I want to be very clear about that. The other side of it, however, is that we're not guaranteeing at this stage whether there are any pay increases or reclassifications. So as I kind of say, don't go out this weekend and buy a new car thinking that you're going to get a reclassification. The only reason I say that is this is a formal process we have to go through. You're a big part of it. You have to provide us with information about what you do, and then we have to review it and come up with recommendations for APS. And then after appropriate deliberation, then is the determination of whether, in fact, there might be reclassifications or changes in requirements, or what have you. So sit tight. There's no decreases in salaries. The other thing to sit tight about is this is not about jobs being reduced or eliminated. We're not looking at the appropriate number of jobs or people that are required in the various locations. It's not about job performance, even though we're asking you to tell us about the work that you're doing. What I like to say is this is not about the person, this is about the job. But the only way we can learn about the job is through the person. So we're not looking at your performance, we're not looking at staffing levels, any other questions you may have of concern that I can help ease any anxiety over this kind of a study, I'm happy to address. But we'd like to get ahead of the curve with at least answers to some of the things that might be going through your head at this juncture. In terms of what we call employee expectations or your role in the process, there are really 3 steps to the process. We're asking you to complete a document called the Job Description Questionnaire, which is a Microsoft Word fillable form. It's real simple, nothing fancy. Don't have to worry about going out on the internet. What this document does, and we'll be spending some time going through it so you feel some level of comfort when you sit down to complete it on your own, is that it asks questions about your major job duties and responsibilities. It asks questions with regard to the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have to perform those duties, right? And it asks about the minimum job requirements to successfully perform the job. So whether it's the level of education, whether it's a specialized education, whether it's years of job-related experience, whether it's here at APS or elsewhere, whether it's certifications or what have you. Those are the kinds of information that we're going to be soliciting from you. Now, once you have completed the job description questionnaire, the job descriptionnaire then goes to your supervisor, and your supervisor role is to review your responses, not to change them. So any of you people here who have supervisory responsibilities, I have to underscore, you can't change what people write, but there are appropriate places within the job description questionnaire where you can provide commentary. Either you agree with what the employee said, you disagree with what the employee said, the employee left this out, this is an important aspect of the job, and they left it out, or to provide some other clarifying information, or even to say, you know, the person is, I'm just being hypothetical now, the person's in an account clerk job title, but they're really doing accounting work. That would be informative to help us with the process. We say to supervisors that not only are you to provide us commentary, but you also are supposed to discuss that with your employee. We don't want any of you to fill out this questionnaire and, as I frequently say, have it go into the abyss and wonder, what did my supervisor say? Whatever happened to this thing? You know, what's this mean to me? So we think that this is an opportunity for a dialogue between you and your supervisor, or if you're a supervisor, between you and your direct reports. But this should be a conversation, and folks should have an understanding of, a good understanding of what's really expected for them on their job. Once supervisors have reviewed this, then the material comes to us, where we go through the process of reading all the job description questionnaires, analyzing the information that you've provided to us. It is likely that we will get multiple job description questionnaires from different people who are currently serving in the same job title. So we want to understand, you know, what consistency there is, or inconsistency, overlap, and so forth, so we get a real full understanding of the work. We will then develop a set of job titles, or what we call a classification architecture, that will identify for any given job title what are the defining characteristics and how does one job relate to the other. So if you're looking over time in terms of career opportunities, advancing your career, say, well, if I'm in this job, what's the next job related to that? What do I need to do to develop my skills to potentially be eligible for that? So we will make recommendations with regard to job title structure. We will be making recommendations with regard to job title assignments, a person by person basis, and we will be updating the job descriptions to reflect how work is performed today. And job descriptions tend to be something that languishes, but obviously the nature of work that you all perform changes over time, differences in technology and what have you, processes. And so it's important for that to be updated. Now, in terms of dates and deadlines, we would like the job description questionnaire, in other words, your initial feedback, to be completed by Wednesday, May 10th. So there's a good 2, almost 3 weeks, I guess, if I have the calendar in my head correctly. And then supervisors will have about another full week to review them, to provide any comments, and all of those JDQs, after they have been reviewed, will be going to compensation study at apsva.us by Friday, May 19th. By a couple of days later, by the 22nd of May, our goal is then for HR to have kind of assembled all of these, their electronic documents, and then to send them to us through this secure file transfer protocol. So we're basically talking about, from today, about a month, maybe a little bit less if you count the days on the calendar, about a month from, you know, starting to complete these to Siegel receiving them. And then we will have a period of time to review them after that. One other point to make, and I think Christy Murphy said this, these documents are Microsoft Word fillable form documents, so nothing fancy. You don't have to complete it all at one time, so you'll get it in an email. You can save it to your desktop or whatever place you save your documents to, and then you can thoughtfully take your time to complete it, as long as you get it to your supervisor by the deadline. And we'll show you in a minute, as we go through the job description questionnaire, if I hit the right button, what the job description questionnaire looks like. And when I talk about it being a fillable form, I'll actually be able to explain to you the sections that you can type in and the sections that you can't type in. So before I get to the document, does anybody have any questions about the process, either why we're doing it or what the expectations are with respect to the time frame or anything else? Okay, so let's go through the job description questionnaire. Now, what you'll be seeing on these slides are kind of screenshots of the actual questionnaire, and because we wanted to try and make the slides readable on the screen, the actual document may look a little bit different because what we wanted to do is highlight the major sections on each page. But the first page, the cover page that you'll see, is asking for that identification, that personally identifiable information: your name, your job title, where you work, your supervisor's name, your job title, and where it was prepared. You'll notice the grayed out section on the right. Wherever you see that grayed out section, that's the fillable form portion of the document. So that's where you will be typing. Interestingly, and you'll see the sections, but while it's not applicable here in other sections, if you just keep typing, the section that's grayed out will keep expanding. So there may be sections where you hopefully not write a book, or maybe not even an essay, but we wanted to accommodate the ability to do that. Now, in the instructions, I want to turn your attention to item number 2, which may be hard to see on the screen, but it's really a protocol that we'd like to have when people save the job description questionnaire. In other words, what file name do I call this Microsoft Word document? And what we'd like you to call the document, the first is your job title, comma, your last name, dot your first name, and then dash JDQ, and dot, depending upon what version of Microsoft Word you're using, it could be .doc or .docx. That's kind of a standard protocol for document naming, depending upon the version of Microsoft Word you're using. But the reason we do this, when we get all these JDQs, it enables us to sort them, or it actually helps HR also in tracking who's done them and who hasn't, by job title first, and then your name within job title. And when we go through the analytics, what we do is we look at all the job description questionnaires of people currently in the same title to see, are there themes, are there similarities, are there differences? So it's real important for us to have that. Another comment, and it'll be several places in the job description questionnaire, is just kind of a reminder, by the way, please get it to your supervisor by May 10th, if not sooner. Obviously, you don't have to wait till May 10th so that Ellen isn't your supervisors aren't inundated, and then Ellen isn't inundated with these responses, but we do have to keep the process moving. Further on the instructions here is again, reinforcement of the deadline and for the supervisors, and also to make sure that supervisors review very carefully the major tasks, the major duties and responsibilities. And by the way, I always like to have to say this is a snapshot of APS right now. So if there's talk in your department about, we may reorganize, or 6 months from now, we expect you to be doing something other than you're doing, think about, when completing this is a snapshot of what you're doing on your job now, whether there are plans for changes that may or may not occur in the future. And the point here to supervisors is to make sure that when you respond, you're responding about what you're doing now. Supervisors should complete your review of the questionnaire and email them to compensationsstudy@apsva.us with the name classification study in the subject line no later than Monday, May 19th. So, how does this start out? The job description questionnaire starts out with something called requesting a basic job summary. And a basic job summary is really a 2 or 3 sentence overview with regard to the purpose of your position. If any of you have looked at a job posting, I know none of you are looking to change jobs, but if you just happen to in your history have looked at a job posting, you'll notice on the top of the job posting, the first paragraph is a summary of what the job is about. And what we're asking you here, again, you'll see the grayed area in the box there, is to just tell us in 2 or 3 sentences the purpose for your job. Again, this is an example of a box that will expand if you were to just keep typing and giving us an essay about what the purpose of your job is. And throughout the JDQ, as you can see here, we give examples of the kinds of things that we're requesting in that. So first part is this basic job summary, and then we have 7 pages that look the same. And each one of these pages is designed to capture information on a major job, duty, and responsibility. What is the definition of a major job, duty, and responsibility? It's something during the course of the year. It doesn't have to happen every day, but it's something in the course of the year that takes up at least 10% of your time. Now, I know you don't sit around with stopwatches and figure out, how much time am I spending on A or B, but you have a general idea of I spend more time on this or less time on that. And so what we're asking is tell us your major duties and responsibilities. Tell us about what % of the time during the course of the year you spend on it, how frequently it occurs. You'll see there's an approximate frequency box there. And then on the bottom part, tell us the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required in your minds to perform that duty. Now, there are 7 of these pages that are identical. We're not saying you have to have 7 duties and major duties and responsibilities, but we have found that this usually accommodates what a typical person does when you think about major duties and responsibilities. And one of the things that we find when talking to folks about thinking about what are my major duties and responsibilities and how do you complete this, I always say, before you get to this, take out a piece of paper and start writing down as it comes to mind the things you do in your job, right? And you'll probably come up with a long list and then try and prioritize that list in terms of importance or the things that take up the most of your time. One of the things that we tend to do, and I do it as well, is confuse responsibilities with tasks. And the best example I have of the difference between a responsibility and a task is if any of you have kids, and in the morning your kid wakes up and there are these tasks you have to do. Make sure they've dressed, make sure they brush their teeth, make sure they had breakfast, make sure their homework is in their backpack. Those are tasks, right? But the responsibility as a parent is to ensure that your child is educated, or to ensure that your child has proper nutrition, or ensure that your child is exhibiting healthy behaviors. So what we're looking for here is those responsibilities, not the tasks. And while you may take out this piece of paper and kind of list things, then take a look at it and say, are these tasks or are these responsibilities? And what we want to gather in this process is what your major duties and responsibilities are, again, defined as taking more than at least 10% of your time. And then what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to be successful with that duty and responsibility? Before I even go on, does anybody have any questions about that and what we're looking for? And quite frankly, what I like to say is take that cheat sheet out in advance of completing this. Great. By the way, there's going to be an exam at the end, so. For those of you who do have responsibilities, the next page, or don't, the next page says, do you formally supervise other employees? And if the answer is yes, then we've got different categories of types of employees here. There are 4 major categories, and we just ask you to tell us the number of employees that you supervise in each of those categories. And we defined, you'll notice a parenthetical up there, we defined supervisory responsibilities by example as if you're responsible for signing performance reviews, or if you're responsible for directing their work assignments, or if you're responsible for hiring or disciplining employees. There's a real formal definition of what a supervisor means. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you have to have at least 2 direct reports to be considered a supervisor. But we're really talking about this in the context of APS's organizational structure. So I just wanted to kind of give you a context about that. The next section of this has to do with whether you exercise discretion or independent judgment in your job. And we give you here examples of exercising discretion or independent judgment, what they may be, and what they're not. So if you're just following standard procedures, standard guidelines that govern your work, and those guidelines say, if this happens, then you do this, if that happens, then you do that, then there's not a lot of discretion or independent judgment. If, on the other hand, you're involved with the ability to make decisions that kind of affect those processes, where you're allowed to, we say here, deviate from standard protocols, where you have the discretion and the authority to say, well, this is the way we normally do it, but in this circumstance, for these reasons, we should handle something in a different way. That's an example of discretion and independent judgment. And these examples here will be in the job description questionnaire. So if you're not sure about whether you do or don't, or the degree to which you exercise discretion or independent judgment, this should be helpful to you in making that determination. The next section here, and by the way, in the real job description questionnaire, remember I said these are screenshots, there will actually be questions attributable to whether you exercise discretion or independent judgment. The next section is the minimum job requirements section. And minimum job requirements, as I mentioned in my opening comments, speak to what do you need to have as a new employee to successfully perform in the job, right? What education might you need? What job-related experience might you need? What certifications or licenses might you need? And the way I like to think about this is, for those of us, and I worked in government for a fair portion of my career, for those of us who've worked at APS or in government, you may have started in your position and in fact, moved up in your position based upon experience on the job and so forth. What we're talking about is, if there was a vacancy in your job title and APS was looking to hire somebody, what I like to say in getting people to answer this is, what do you think the qualification should be of the person who would work side by side with you doing the work that you're doing? So this is kind of like, not what you have, this is not, or not how you got to your position. Remember, I started out by saying this is not about you, it's about the position and what we need. Again, if there was a vacancy, what would you think somebody should have to work side by side with you to be qualified to perform similar work? So that's what the minimum requirements are. And then sometimes we have preferred requirements, things above and beyond the minimum. Maybe it's not just having, if you're in the finance function, which is where I worked in government, it may not be that you just have a bachelor's degree, but you have a bachelor's degree in accounting, or you've had some specialized coursework that's related to procurement, or you have a procurement certification. And that can permeate lots of different areas. But that's what we mean by preferred. You don't absolutely have it, but it would be nice if the new candidate did have it and it was job related. One of the things you cannot do is set these qualifications too high. That's why they're called minimum qualifications, because you can't have something called artificial barriers to entry. You can't set something so high that it filters out people and it's not really in a job related manner. So it's really important for us to understand from your perspective what you think those minimum requirements should be for the position for somebody coming into the job. Okay, the next section is a section on physical requirements. These are typical kinds of things that you would find that in looking at a job, there has to be some sensitivity here on the Americans with Disabilities Act to understanding what the physical requirements are. So if there's somebody who requires a special accommodation, we know what it is and what the job is about. Again, this is a check off the box kind of situation. It really describes whether your job is pretty sedentary, you work at a desk for long periods of time, or there are various levels of physical demands attributable to your job. We ask in addition to checking off the box, in the section below, to give a couple of examples of the type of items or work that's involved in the level of lifting or moving associated with your job. There's also a section on working conditions, and what we're basically saying here is there are at least 3 working conditions. There's an opportunity for you to fill in a 4th one under the other row. For each one of these, do you seldom or never experience it, sometimes, or frequently or often? So for every row, there should be 1 checkbox on this. Fairly straightforward. So that's what you as an employee need to complete. And the section that will take you the most time is obviously the major duties and responsibilities. And we've tried to give sufficient time so that this can be a thoughtful process, and that you really are able to tease out the major duties and responsibilities from the tasks, as I mentioned a few moments ago. Once you complete this, as I said, the process is to send it to your supervisor. And what your supervisor sees is a couple of things. First of all, you'll notice on the bottom of this page, which is the supervisor's review section, there is a grayed out section that says, please tell us anything you think you should know about this position. There are one of those grayed out sections on every page of the JDQ, and it'll say supervisor's comments. So the supervisor's comments, for those of you who are supervisors, can be made on a page-by-page basis. If you think that there's something that you need to amplify or correct. But also on the summary page, there's a section and this is again expandable in terms of typing in there. But what we really want to know for those of you who are supervisors is your perception. Is the job title that the person currently is in, based upon all they've told us and told you as about the work that they do, is it correct? Is there something additional that's not clear here? Do you think the person should be in a different job title than the job title they're in, based upon the work that's done? So once this is completed by the supervisors, that goes via email to Ellen Kennedy, and by the 19th of May. Please note, when you transmit this via email, this was kind of important, in the narrative section, where it says subject line, please note just the words classification study. That way, when Ellen gets a couple of hundred of these, she can sort by subject line and kind of group them all together. Any questions about the process, deadlines, about the questions that are asked, or how we want the answers? Anything? Happy to. Yes?
Will the results be shared with everyone at a later date?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we do with all this information is then review it and identify what are those characteristics. And of course, we're going to get multiple responses from people doing the same job, so it's not, we have to say, well, is this the same or is this different? But we will be developing a classification structure, and think of it as a big Excel spreadsheet, because it's just easy to think about it that way. So it will have like current job title, proposed job title, major duties and responsibilities, what are the differentiating factors in terms of not just minimum job requirements, but whether you're required to supervise, whether you have independent judgment and discretion, variety of things. And this will kind of lay out a blueprint as to what the definition of the different job titles are. I think there will then, and I got to defer to, don't mean to put you on the spot, Ellen, but once we do that, then obviously there's the potential that changes in the classification structure could affect individual employees. And then there'll be further evaluation of that and discussions with that. But that's kind of the game plan. And the game plan for this, by the way, is we need to get this information from you before people start taking vacations and it's the summer and so forth and so on. But it'll be over the summer that we will be doing, our work on it. So there will be a period of, quiet, so to speak, but hopefully quiet for you guys over the summer, where we'll be working our way to understand what's going on. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, how do you account for
So that's a very good question. So in the duties and responsibilities section, when you explain to us what you're doing, remember, there's a lot, you could have as much space as you want. I would put it in there, okay? Anyone else with questions? Going once? Twice? Okay. Thanks very much. Appreciate your attention to this. You bet. Thank you.